see it.
All right, perfect. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I know that you're all very busy, and I appreciate taking time of your day to join this talk today. And I hope that I can bring some light. As Kevin said, we have a huge partnership with the Los Angeles Unified School District here in California. So I can talk to you a little bit about my experience, maybe give you some ideas of some strategies that you could follow back in your communities, and then answer any questions for you. Just a little bit about myself. I was a math and Spanish teacher for about 10 years. I started teaching straight out of college. I attended Pomona College, part of the Claremont colleges out here in the LA area, and immediately fell in love with teaching, with education. I always knew that that was something that I wanted to do. However, after doing it for a few years, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher my entire life. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And so once I started tutoring, I fell in love with that. And at that point, I don't feel like there were a lot of role models in terms of being a professional tutor. That wasn't necessarily a thing. But I think nowadays that is definitely more route that people are taking, and definitely within our own company, that's something that we're helping develop people to become more professional tutors. I resigned my tutoring position in 2008 and started tutoring since then. So I've been in this business for a very long time. I started as a solo tutor. So I essentially leverage my connections from being a teacher to start tutoring on my own and collecting and starting a student base that way. Eventually, I partnered with an independent college counselor. So essentially, that college counselor would offer services to their students and then refer them to me for either SAT tutoring or academic tutoring. And then from there, I decided that I wanted to expand our services to reach a broader audience and bring that information to more students. So then I founded Mundo Academy in 2018. The goal was to bring the services that I had learned from working in an independent, mostly with students in independent schools, to students in public schools. As a first generation student myself, I felt like all the information that they received and the access to services that they had was something that students in communities such as the one where I grew up didn't always have access. So I wanted to bring that in. I am the parent of 3 cats. I love to cycle. And I'm a supporter of LGBTQ and Black Lives Matter movement. So that's a little bit about me. So part of the questions that you might ask is, why should you create any sort of partnership with the school district, or a community-based organization? I'll be using the term nonprofit organization interchangeably, but it's a community-based organization. For myself, when I first started Mundo, I wanted to, like I mentioned, bring services to more students. I felt like we were working in a very isolated community, and I wanted to reach a broader audience. I wanted more students. I had the experience of organizing several classes, and I saw how profitable classes were, but I wasn't always able to organize those as effectively as I wanted. And again, I wanted to create a scenario where I would bring those classes to low-income students or students in underrepresented communities. I actually started by organizing classes on my own, and starting to charge for them in areas of outside of where my business was based. So my original business was based in Pasadena, California area. And if you're familiar with that, there's a lot of private schools there, as well as very competitive public school districts. So I branched out of that area and went into East Los Angeles or Southeast Los Angeles and tried to organize SAT prep classes. And I didn't have very much interest in them. I probably had 2 or 3 students sign up at that point for these classes, even though they were very inexpensive. And what I realized was that I wasn't known in those communities and I didn't have trust. Trust is such a major factor whenever you're going into any new area or community-based organization. So that was the first thing that I wanted to do, was build trust, get my name out there. So what I started doing was organizing or forming partnerships with community-based organizations. So what I did is that I researched organizations that offered youth services, and then seeing how it was that I could form a partnership with them by offering my own expertise. And the expertise that I brought was essentially that I knew the SAT, ACT inside out. I knew the college admissions process inside out. And I also, and what all of you have as you work as private vendors, also, you have a unique view of the communities where you work, meaning that you probably know the teachers at different independent schools and who they are. You know the rigor at different schools. You're familiar with what the SAT scores are, what students are doing to get into top colleges, the types of type colleges or top colleges that they're getting into. So you already come with a wide range of knowledge that now you can transplant that knowledge into a new community and serve as a sounding board and provide that information to people who may not have it. Community organizations do have grant money that are dedicated to youth services. Many of them offer tutoring after school or summer school programs. But what tends to happen and what happens in school environments too is that they might not have someone with expertise on staff. So it might just be a staff member who's running that program and kind of putting things together, or they're using a random test prep book to do some test prep with their students. But they don't really know how to manage tutoring, or they may not have content, people who really know the content of any academic subject. So they might not have math experts or ELA experts or as essay writing coaches, which is something that as a tutoring company, you likely have on staff. These organizations have these grant monies that they can either allot to you or allot to someone on staff. Public school districts and public schools themselves also have funds that they can allocate. And as Kevin mentioned in his intro speech today, we know that learning loss is still a reality, pandemic-related learning loss. And one of the things that we're seeing is that specifically in low-income communities, those gaps have gotten larger. So part of those monies, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation, is that there is money there to hire outside tutoring companies to come and provide support. And I'll tell you a little bit about my experience on that end. And the biggest reason why you should go in is because school staff is overworked. The reality at many of the schools, particularly the ones that we partner with, is that teachers don't want to provide tutoring. They don't want to provide additional intervention, even though it means more money for them, whether it's after school or doing Saturday school. So as a tutoring company, you're really alleviating some of that pain. So you're bringing in your own staff, you're training them. They're going to know the content that you're going to be teaching, and it takes that pressure off of teachers. Business-wise, again, if you can secure these contracts, they tend to be longer term, at least for 1 year. If you do a good job, you can continue renewing them with the school district. They tend to be longer. Our current contract with LA Unified is for 3 years. So it's definitely work that you are going to be able to rely on and build upon. So the reason to, at least with schools and school districts, one of the areas in which they're going to focus is going to be combating learning loss. So I took this data from the New York Times, and you can all Google this article, which is "See How Your School District is Recovering from the Pandemic." And you can look up particular school districts throughout the country. And it really shows you the trend for different communities. So here I have West New York, Boston, and Los Angeles. You can't really see Los Angeles, but that's part of what we have there. So it shows us how in 2016, where students were and then what the trajectory was and where they are in 2013. So I chose these three districts because, particularly with Los Angeles and Boston, Los Angeles was always behind, right? So we look at Los Angeles always about 2 years behind, and it sort of started going up in 2019. It took a dip, and so then now it's actually coming back up in 2023. However, you have school districts like in Boston where it has this trend where in 2016 it started to go in a decline. The pandemic really brought it down, and then it's sort of staying steady from there. Um, the reason why you want to look at this data is because you want to be informed of what's happening in your school districts and what's happening in your communities, so that when you reach out to schools, you know what the data is, and you are not coming in as an outsider, an outside tutoring company trying to sell your services, which obviously ultimately that's the goal, but that you're positioning yourself as a partner in this project or in this same commitment of improving student outcomes. Improving student outcomes is going to be the number one target and reason why these schools are going to hire you. On this New York Times article, you're able to look up, like I said, most school districts, and then you're able also to look up specific communities, which I felt this is essentially, the landscape of what we have today. Um, so during the pandemic, there were $190 billion of pandemic relief funds that were given out to schools throughout the nation. That's a lot of money. And the Center for Education Policy researcher at Harvard did research to see if that money paid off. So did students improve and did student outcomes improve because of these funds? And overall, the answer was yes. The consensus was that the money was well used, that school districts and schools were able to improve student performance overall. I believe it was like 0.8 grades or so. They have like really specific outcomes on there in terms of how much each school district increased by. I have a link for you all that I'll pull up and put in the chat. But through this link, you're able to, again, look up specific communities and see what their changes were so that you can look up your own school districts and figure out what's going on there. And so then, like I mentioned, for you to become well-versed in terms of what's happening within your general area. Now, where do we go from there? So a lot of the pandemic relief funds are used, they've been distributed. So then what does that mean for tutoring companies today? One of the changes today is that Title I funds are 3% of Title I funds, which are monies given by the federal government, can go towards tutoring programs and tutoring services. What are Title I funds? So Title I funds are monies that can go towards schools and school districts where there's a high percentage of low-income families, and this is across the nation. You can look up which states receive the greatest amount of monies of Title I funds per student, so you could see again how much money your schools are receiving. Essentially, the U.S. Department of Education distributes these funds to the states, and then the states distribute them to local governments, and then they distribute them to school districts, and then those are given to schools. The funds can be used for two purposes. One, to provide school-wide programming, and then two, to provide target assistance programming. So target assistance programming means that you're offering programming for targeted student populations. Targeted student populations are students who are low income, and particularly those students who are emergent bilinguals. Emergent bilinguals are English language learners, so students who speak another language and haven't yet demonstrated English language proficiency. Newcomer students are students who have been in the country for under 3 years. Foster youth, and on-house students. So Title I funds is going to target all of those populations. Now, within, let's say, a community like the Los Angeles Unified School District, it has a high percentage of emergent bilingual students, which means that Title I funds can be used to provide services to the majority of the students in the district. And so then there isn't necessarily that distinction. So if you go on to, let's say, looking at demographic information for your communities in your districts, you can see what percentage of students are low income, what percentage of students are English language learners or emergent bilinguals, foster youth, etc. And then you can design programming specifically to target those populations. So, and again, there's always money reserved within Title I to fund programs that are going to help those students bridge the academic loss from the pandemic, but overall, those students have always had a gap in their learning in comparison to the other general populations. So what are the needs? So whenever we're looking at, or at least when I first started and I was approaching schools and nonprofits on the type of programming that I would offer, I was mostly working within high school. So I was a high school teacher. I was well-versed in SAT and ACT prep. I also have a program that we have developed on study skills, and that was essentially the type of programming that I was targeting that I was reaching out to the schools with. As I met more principals and I actually ventured more into elementary school and middle school, I realized that there is a high need within literacy and math in K-5. That's a huge area of need at the moment. I find that recently, when I first started with my partnership with the school district, I would say in 2021, the big focus was literacy. So building on something that's called the science of reading, which is the big buzzword right now, which utilizes phonics and phonics instruction to improve literacy outcomes. Um, Currently, this year, what I'm seeing is more a shift into math. I feel like schools feel like they have maybe the literacy part maybe covered and that they understand it a little bit better. And now they're shifting their focus to math. That's what I'm seeing with our contracts and our tutoring our tutoring requests for next school year being more if we could do math and help students improve within math and numeracy. Um, Math, however, is an area I think of instruction across all grades, but particularly in K-5, because I don't know what your experience was in elementary school. Not all elementary schools are great math teachers, just how not all elementary schools are great English teachers. So math is definitely one of those areas where schools are going to be looking at, I think, and improving. That's one of the areas I think of opportunity. Like I mentioned before, emergent bilinguals. So emergent bilinguals are English language learners, so students who speak another language. These are not necessarily students who are immigrants. These are many times students who were born in the US. They speak another language at home, and they have not been able to demonstrate English language proficiency. The goal with emergent bilinguals is that they demonstrate English language proficiency by the time they definitely by the time they leave elementary school, but absolutely by the time they leave middle school, even though they may not ever demonstrate English language proficiency. But the reason why we're looking for this goal is because these students have a much lower rate of meeting A through G requirements once they get into high school. And then also they have a much lower percentage of being college ready. So that's a big area of need within the schools. Again, in middle school, they usually have an English language development class in which they enroll, and they aren't able to take any electives, and that stays true throughout high school. Another area are newcomers. As I mentioned before, newcomers, I feel, is an area where many schools don't know how to handle newcomers. Newcomers are students that have been in the country for fewer than 3 years. Many times in my experience, they are placed in a regular classroom, and the teacher doesn't necessarily know how to manage them because they're not able to participate in class. And so then everybody is at a different level. If you imagine there's a student who is sitting there, doesn't speak any English, and they're not necessarily getting any additional support. So if you're able to come up, and I'd be happy to meet with any of you to talk to you more about newcomer programming and what those needs are. If you're able to develop something like that in your community, and again, you can do research on the number of newcomers that there are. I'm sure that there's many of them. This is a high area of need, I would say, throughout the country, absolutely in Los Angeles, but throughout the country. And if you're able to create programming surrounding support for newcomers, then you will absolutely be able to get into any school of your choice. AP support. So I'm sure, as you all know, AP exams can be submitted as a testing option for highly competitive colleges. AP support is always needed and specialized. In terms of test prep, you all are familiar with helping students prepare for exams like the SAT and the ACT, or the ICE and the HSBT. State exams are no different. That is absolutely an area. In California, we have the CASP or the Smarter Balance. They're the same exam. I'm sure every state has these exams, and schools and principals are always looking to improve their outcomes on that. So if you're able to offer some sort of test prep offering surrounding the skills of teaching students how to use strategy and improve their test taking skills, that's something that could also sell very well. Oftentimes schools have Saturday school programs that you can help support. So most of the programming that we do around helping students prepare for state exams happen during Saturday school programming. So essentially what we do is create a package of, let's say, 8-week worth of classes, maybe 3 hours a week, hour and a half math, hour and a half ELA. And then the school invites students to participate. Remediation or intervention services, study skills, and then SAT prep. In California, SAT prep is not as common within the public schools anymore because UCs and Cal States no longer require the SAT. So it's not necessarily an area of need as much as it might be in other states. So what should you do if you want to reach out to a nonprofit or a CBO and you want to establish a partnership? The very first thing would be to identify the schools that you feel would benefit from your expertise. So do research to figure out which are the schools that are high need, which are the schools who are receiving that Title I funding, so that then you're able to target those communities in those areas. You might already know who they are, but definitely creating a short list is going to benefit you in the long run. The next thing that you could do is research community centers that offer youth services, like I mentioned before. So within these same communities, are there any community centers or CBOs that are already offering youth services? So you can even look at something like the Boys and Girls Club, any other type of large center where maybe there's after school tutoring or any other type of support for youth. One area that I would also recommend would be maybe reaching out to sport teams in the sense of we had a partnership with a football academy, and so it was essentially we worked with their students because, as you know, they have to maintain a 2.0 GPA in order to continue playing. So we had a partnership with them where we would offer tutoring services to the students who were part of their sports academy. So anything like that that is youth related, it could be somewhere where you could find an area of opportunity with something of support that you could provide. You can also, if you already do this, you can offer some college prep. So like I mentioned before, like with the football league, we did some SAT prep. This was actually before the pandemic. We did SAT prep, and then we did some workshops on college prep on how to write college essays or applying to college, or just sessions where we would help students complete some of their Cal State applications. So any add-on that you could do that you can offer that's going to add value to the school is going to be, or I'm sorry, to the CBO, is going to be very beneficial to them. The other type of partnership that we've gone over through are religiously affiliated middle schools and elementary schools. We actually are currently running an HSBT prep class at a Catholic middle school. Essentially, again, the school markets the class. We offer it at their school facility. They recruit the students and they pay us to offer the class. And so we created this partnership again because they had summer school offerings. We looked at what those offerings were, and then I came in and met with the principal and asked if they'd be interested in having us take this HSBT class off their hands. We've done something similar with the ISE previously as well, also actually with the religiously affiliated school. The ICE is not required at many of the schools in the areas where we work. So then we stopped that partnership, but the HSBT is still being used widely here. And it also comes with scholarship money for the students who do well on it. And so then religiously affiliated schools are very much interested in helping the students prepare for that exam. So now we kind of talked about what types of monies there are, what types of programs you might be able to offer, what types of organizations or schools you can reach out to. So what are some things that you could do to prepare before you reach out? The first thing that you should do is become a vendor with your school district. This is actually not a very difficult process. At least it wasn't for me within LA Unified. It's going to allow you to have a vendor number and to be registered within their system. You do have to have, you do have to be registered. You have to have a federal ID number, etc. But definitely register as a vendor so that you are within that, so that you're able to serve as a contractor there. Make sure that you have insurance. I found my insurance through Cover Wallet, which is just like an online agency. I'm sure that Kevin might have recommendations of other insurance providers that you could reach out to, but make sure that you have the insurance requirements that you will need in order to work in the schools. The biggest hurdle for me with finding insurance was finding sexual molestation insurance, which was a requirement that I needed to have before I went into any schools. And so I was able to find that. And when I reached out to, let's say, my local insurance person, the prices for that were astronomical. When I went through Cover Wallet, it was very affordable. So make sure that you look up to see what type of insurance you would need to have. Also, if you're working on a school site, you do need to have live scans, be able to provide background checks and live scans and TB tests. So again, to be a live scan agency, you have to apply through the Department of Justice, go through a whole process. It's just paperwork, though. It's nothing that is extremely difficult to do. I would say before you reach out to any school, figure out what their pain is. What is it that you're trying to solve? Why should they hire you? And what are you going to be providing that they don't have already and that they wouldn't be able to find? So make sure that you identify what those pain points are, which I'm sure many of you already know. Everybody's overworked. If you go to any public school, you would see that most people, particularly the principals, are extremely overworked. They have a ton to do. So how is it that you're going to help to alleviate that pain? Identify what types of services you're going to offer, how those services are going to be delivered, and what staff you're going to need in order to deliver those services. So are you going to supplement something that they already are offering? Are you going to offer a whole new service? Or are you going to take over a current service that's already there? So for example, with our partnership with our middle school, they're already offering HSBT prep, so we took over that service. At many of the schools where we work, they don't have programming for newcomers. So then that's a new service that we came in and said, we can offer this for you. With our literacy coaching, that is something that's already happening on campuses. So then we're supplementing that service. So think about what is it that you want to do and how you're going to deliver that. And what is your value proposition? So why should this school take 10,000, 20,000 of their general budget to devote to your company? So what is it that you're going to provide? One thing that I would say with working with schools is that schools do have their own discretionary funds to use. Like I mentioned before, they do have a general budget which they can access throughout the year. You have to be careful and find out, and you can request that information. You could probably look up that information with a particular school district, but there are usually contractual limits that will allow the school to hire you without having to go through a bidding and procurement process. So within the Los Angeles Unified School District, that amount is $25,000, meaning that if you have any contract that is under $25,000, you don't have to go through a procurement bidding process. The school can hire you directly. If it's anything that's above $25,000, then the school does have to submit more paperwork and open up to bidding. So look up to see what those limitations may be within the school districts where you want to work. Again, that wouldn't be the case for any independent schools or Catholic schools, but it would be if you want to reach a partnership with any school within a school district. So once you figure out what it is that you want to offer and how you're going to offer, what you want to do is that you want to make a connection. So identify who the decision makers are going to be. For example, for us in the elementary school arena, usually our decision maker is going to be the principal and maybe their admin team. However, in the middle school and the high school arena, it's usually not the principal. We hardly ever deal with the principal when it comes to a middle school and high school contract. Normally, we're dealing with on our end what's called a TSP advisor, and that's a targeted student population advisor or coordinator. Or Title III coordinator. You have to do some research in terms of who is dealing with the different populations and services, and those would be the people that you want to reach out to. Again, with middle school and high school, more than likely, it may not be the principal at all. So you do have to look into that and figure that out. If you know someone who works at some of these schools, that's an excellent way to get that information. Doing some legwork beforehand and figuring out how things work and what the structure is within these schools is going to be highly useful for you. So figure out, again, like if you know a teacher at a school or if you know an administrator at one of these schools, sit down with them and ask them questions about who makes the decisions, how are decisions made, and what would be the best way for you to reach out to someone. Learn the lingo, so meaning that learn like the type of testing that they're doing at that school. What kind of literacy testing do they do? For example, in LUSD, they use a program called iReady for grades 3 to 12. So when I meet with someone, then I know everything that there is to know about iReady and how it is that we can support students in that. They use it for math actually as well. Everything that there is to know about that platform and the testing that is done. So make sure that you know all of the lingo that is associated with the types of services and the outcomes that you want to see. When I first started with these meetings, I didn't know all of the lingo, which is okay. You don't have to know everything, but I would literally create long list of acronyms that people would use that I would later on look up and research so that then I could use them in my follow-up meetings. Take advantage of the summer. So this is actually huge for us. As you may know, principals often don't take as much vacation as teachers do, and it's downtime for principals. They're in their office and they're working on other things. This is an excellent time to reach out to them and to set up a meeting or come by with donuts or some kind of treat that you can offer them and the school staff. Here in the LA area, principal's actually on vacation. They come back on July 18th. So kind of figure out maybe when those dates are before school starts, that you can start reaching out to them and marketing yourself. I would say reaching out to them in person and making a personal connection is going to be much better than sending emails. They receive a ton of emails. Email marketing may not work with them, and they may not look at your email or return your an email that you might send. But if you show up there with something and you have your marketing materials ready, they're more likely to respond and be open to you. So like I said, you can offer some sort of freebie as well. I've done this with a nonprofit. So when we had our partnership with Puente Learning Center, we offered a free SAT bootcamp that we marketed. They allowed us to use their space to offer it. And then eventually they ended up hiring us to do SAT prep with them. So when it comes to, let's say, a nonprofit, you can offer some sort of freebie. You can offer a practice test. As you know, Tutoring Test Prep Professionals offers proctored SAT tests. So maybe you could, partner with them to offer some kind of like freebie. Or if you're just proctoring like a paper test for the ACT or something like that, or an SAT versus ACT predictor test, something that you can then garner more attention for yourself. You can do a review session before AP exams or also before an SAT, or do like an SAT boot camp. Learn about the environment also, I think, in which you're coming into. So be well versed again with the demographics and what are the particular needs of the community in which you're coming into. And the biggest thing I think that I've learned is that you have to make it as easy as possible for the schools to hire you. You have to make sure that your onboarding process is easy, that you are managing everything on your end, and that you're not creating more work for them, so that you have a clear onboarding path, clear vision of what your service is, that you're able to be succinct in terms of describing what it is that you do, so that it doesn't take too much time. If you make it too difficult, they're not going to do it. They're not going to go through with it. The biggest thing I think also is to listen. So like I might have mentioned this before, when I first went into schools, I went in with the idea that we were going to do, test prep and study skills. As I started meeting with principals, I started hearing, or with coordinators, I started really hearing that they needed support for emergent bilingual students and newcomers. They kept mentioning that in every meeting. So then that made me pivot and decide that I needed to create programming around these populations. So really listen to what is being communicated to you and what the needs are, and think about how you can, we are private professionals, so we can kind of pivot and be a little bit more flexible on what our offerings are. So don't be rigid in terms of what you offer. Figure out how it is that you can mold yourself to fit the needs of the school. Because as we know, word of mouth is very powerful. So these principals have principals meetings, the coordinators have coordinators meetings. If you're developing a program that is working within their schools and their communities, they're going to tell other schools and communities about you. So you really want to make sure that you listen to them and that you make implementation as easy as you possibly can. And of course, market yourself as far and wide as you can. And again, figure out what marketing strategy is best for you and that you're going to have time for. But market as much as possible. And whenever you do land one of those meetings, make sure that you're as prepared as you possibly can be. After you start working with these schools, so after you make this connection, I think earlier there was a presentation on tracking data and measuring student outcomes. That is going to be extremely important. Make sure that whatever type of programming you offer, Oh, sorry about that. Let's say any type of programming that you offer, make sure that you are measuring the results of what you're doing. You have to make sure that you keep track of your data, that you're keeping track of your students, and that you're showing what kind of progress they made as a result of your programs. This can be in the form of pre-tests and post-tests. It could be in the form of data that the school provides for you as well, but you definitely have to have internal systems and train your staff to make sure that those assessments are recorded and recorded accurately. You also have to make sure that you track attendance. You must have a system in which you have attendance tracking so that you could show, and often actually the schools and the districts are going to ask you for reports on attendance information. How much support did any individual student receive within your program? How much intervention did they obtain? You want to make sure that you survey your participants. So whether it's the students themselves or the teachers you're working with or the administrators, you do want to have those testimonials to help you as you're going through. And then have a clear list of services that you're offering and pricing to go along with it. My pricing, not to say that it's flexible, but it's prorated. So I'll have kind of like a standard package and then I'll prorate that depending on what the school tells me so that I can match their budget needs. So usually I'll tell them it's this much for one group of 5 students, and then I'll change that up depending on what the other needs are. Something I don't have on here that you also have to be aware of and that it would be a good point for you to discuss would be your like data privacy. LAUSD was hacked a couple of years ago, and so student data was, and I think employee data too, was accessed by hackers. So now everything that we do is very well monitored in terms of how are we ensuring that we're keeping student data secure. So if you have systems in place already and have that in mind, then I would put that in writing and have it outlined so that if a school asks you about that, then you already know what your systems are or your controls are. Um, and so some of our success stories. So as I've been mentioning, one of our largest contracts is with the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the second largest school district in the country. Last year we worked with 30 schools within LAUSD. We had about 27 elementary schools and 3 middle schools, and we offered a wide range of programming. Because of that, we had to hire a great number of tutors, and we mostly we hired tutors that were mostly part of the local community. That was one of our goals, to hire people who were part of the local community. Our approach was to hire people who that had some experience, but also some that don't have very much experience. And we do all of the training. So we have a very robust training system that we implement and use, as well as a hiring system overall. Setting up our systems and procedures has been, I think, one of the biggest challenges, but it really has paid off rewards because now every tutor goes through kind of like a line in terms of how we hire them, how we onboard them, how we train them, how we then set them up with the schools in which we work. We have a great retention rate. Our retention rate is about 70% from one year to the other. And like I mentioned before, the goal is to have people see tutoring as a possible career option. So who are our tutors? Our tutors are often recent college graduates, retired teachers, retired people who want to come back and give back to their communities, people who are just looking for part-time jobs. So a lot of our work is actually done during the school day. So we do have, work from like 8 to 12, which is very attractive to many people. The biggest, I think, concern that I hear from the schools where we work about other tutoring companies, and this comes more as something for you all to keep in mind, is the lack of training that companies provide to their tutors. So make sure that when you're sending tutors to any school site, that you have trained them on everything, not just not only the materials that they're providing, that they're teaching, but then also how to act in a professional manner in a school setting. That is something that you should always keep in mind as you're sending someone to represent you and to represent your company. Another success story is that we have a partnership with College Match. College Match is a community-based organization that works with underserved, low-income high school juniors. They work with approximately 150 to 160 high school juniors on a yearly basis, and their college access program. So we partner with them and we offer a variety of worksheets, not worksheets, sorry, workshops for them. One of them is we do a study skills workshop for their students, study skills and time management. And then we also do SAT prep for them. We're actually doing SAT prep for them now. So again, this is an organization that used to do SAT prep. They would hire outside SAT prep tutors to do SAT prep. But then they partnered with us and now we essentially manage all of their tutoring. Actually, I didn't mention, we also do tutoring for them. So their students, we have a contract with them where their students reach out to us and we provide academic subject tutoring. So we're their go-to partner in terms of any tutoring, test prep, and workshops that they want to coordinate for their students. So that is, I think, a very tangible way for you to kind of envision of the type of organizations that you could go after in terms of creating these partnerships. Incarnation Parish School is the Catholic affiliated middle school that I mentioned earlier. So that one we offer HSBT classes there every summer. We've been doing it now for about 5 years. It's only a 2-week course, but usually it leads to private clients. So then the students who then participate in this class, oftentimes their parents end up hiring us to provide private tutoring afterwards. So then that is definitely a funnel into our private tutoring services. So those are some of our success stories. We have other partnerships and always, I think, things like happening and going on. We're actually probably expanding our partner, or we are expanding our partnership with LA Unified. We're going to start offering after school tutoring with them through the district, which is something we're very excited about. We're just going into that contract now, so I don't know too much about it, but maybe at next year's conference, I can talk more about what those look like and what these high dosage tutoring programs are like and provide some insight for you all on that end. So with that, I think that's all for me. I'll open it up for any questions. Thank you for your attention. I'm sure I gave you a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions for you.